Hello everybody. This is a video that I've been wanting to make for a while. I've been trying to work up the courage to do it. Been trying to work up the courage to do a lot of things. Those of you who know me and my situation, I'm doing well. About as well as I can be, I guess, all things considered. Today we are going to be debunking some DID and OSDD myths, 12 to be exact. I have my notes right here, because if I didn't, I would forget what I'm saying so many times in this video. So I wrote everything down. I wrote all my points down. So we have 12 very commonly believed myths. First, let's get out of the way. DID is dissociative identity disorder. OSDD is other specified dissociative disorder. It's a mouthful. So if you have dissociative symptoms and you have a lot of similar stuff that happens, but you don't like fully switch out ever, or have a lot of the amnesia that goes on with like quote unquote full-blown DID, you might be diagnosed with OSDD and subtypes of that. So let's get into it here. Myth number one is the shattered mind concept. I do not fault or judge at all anybody who believes this, because I even felt this way about it before I was like fully informed and, talking to therapists and psychiatrists and all of that and found out what was really going on. Why is my throat so dry? So the shattered mind concept basically states that the child was so traumatized and went through so much hell, basically, that the only way that the brain could cope with it was to split into pieces and shatter. And that's why you have all of these like distinct personality states and dissociation now. So really quickly, one thing that I forgot to say, DID and OSDD both are results of severe childhood trauma. There's more that goes into it than that, but that's the basic premise of it. You cannot have it without that factor. It is not a thing that you are born with. It is not a thing that you can develop through other means. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But that's basically what the shattered mind concept says. So the reality of DID and OSDD and other dissociative disorders is that they have to form in childhood before your personality, before your identity is fused together and solidified as like one thing and like the person that you are, because you're not born with an identity or a personality or a sense of self. Those things kind of develop over time, right? So the abuse and the trauma that happens that makes you have DID or makes you have OSDD is so severe that it's called the theory of structural dissociation, and it is the common psychiatric belief now at this point. Your mind didn't shatter, your self didn't shatter, because you never had a self. You weren't you, and then like pieces like were fragmenting off like to cope with trauma. Rather, what happened is that you were going through the abuse and the trauma that you were going through, and that trauma and abuse prevented your self, your personality, your identity from forming as a whole piece, and it kept everything separate and fragmented. There's also You can have partial DID, which funnily enough is not classified under DID, it's classified under OSDD, OSDD1. You can have, so partial DID is basically where you have a lot of the dissociative symptoms, but you don't necessarily have, like I said, like the full switches or distinct personality states at times. As with DID, you have polyfragmented DID, which I'm not going to get too terribly into. Basically, polyfragmented DID is, I guess the easiest way to explain it and understand it would be like a very severe case of DID. So you don't just have the dissociation and the alters. Some of your alters might have some of their own alters and some of their own subsystems. And each alter might believe that they are the quote-unquote real person. That's more or less... polyfragmented DID can have hundreds up to thousands of alters and different things going on in there. Number 2, I talked way longer than I wanted to on that first one. All alters must be the same gender as the host, or the host is faking if they don't have any different gender alters. So these are 2 variations of basically the same view. That you can tell if someone is lying about having DID or not by investigating their alters. Some people believe that all of your alters have to be the same gender, and if any are different, then that's proof that they're lying, because how could, for example, a woman have an alter who is male? And the inverse of that is that maybe all the stories that they know of DID have at least one alter that is a different gender than the host body. So therefore, if you don't have that and you claim that all of your alters are the same gender, then you're obviously faking. Both of those are false. You can have anywhere from... alters can have their own ages, they can have their own religions, ethnicities. Yes, that gets very complex and complicated very fast. Different things that they believe, they can be like different culture-wise, and yes, different genders. Number 3, women are more likely to have DID. This one is, it could possibly be true, but the reasons why, like the way that it's presented, is not. So if you Google this, if you go to Google and you type in, are women more likely to have DID than men, you will get results anywhere from a 2-to-1 ratio to a 9-to-1 ratio of women with DID compared to men. Number 1, women are much more likely to seek out mental health treatment than men. So that already causes a disparity in that. Men are more likely to turn to substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, stuff like that. So even if they do seek out mental health treatment, a lot of stuff is going to be kind of pinned on that. You can have DID and be on drugs or alcohol or whatever, but it's very hard to kind of determine sometimes, is it the drugs doing this, or is it the alcohol, or is this a thing that was before, and then they turn to these things like to cope with it. And going through therapy, going through psychiatric treatment is really the only way to know for sure. But it's not just a simple black and white of women are 100% more guaranteed to like have DID than men. Let's see. You can have DID or OSDD without trauma, memory gaps, or alters. I'm going to split this into 3 very short answers. The first part of that is very disrespectful. And I'm just going to say that. As somebody who has survived shit that most of you would not believe. You wouldn't be able to wrap your head around it. Like I said, the only way that you can develop DID or OSDD, they both have this in common, is by going through trauma and abuse that is so severe and so inescapable at an early enough age in childhood, before your identity is formed and solidified. And that that causes what is referred to as the fragmentation, which I don't really like, because that makes it sound like I said, like there's a whole thing and then pieces are fragmenting off of it. That causes the failure to integrate of the personality. It's failed integration is what it is. It's not a shattering. So you'll see these like really young people a lot of times on like TikTok and stuff like that, talking about to come and see my my cool disorder that I have and come meet all my friends in my head. And I don't have trauma. I was born with it, or it happened like some other way. Disrespectfully, if you do that, fuck off. Okay, that's done. Memory gaps or alters. Alters and memory gaps both are requirements for DID. The diagnostic criteria for DID is to have at least two or more distinct personality states that take control of the person. And memory gaps, because when one individual or another is in control and doing things and running things, the other ones are not going to know about it. They are not going to know what happened. So I've had it happen where, like, just for example, whenever I was working as a CNA, and this is going to scare some people, then I'm sorry, but it's just what the truth is. I would wake up, you have that feeling of like kind of coming to, right? But the body was always awake and doing what it was doing. But you have that feeling of kind of coming to. So I would wake up at work and I would already be in a patient's room doing something with the patient or the resident. But I did not have any memory of walking into that room, introducing myself to the patient, driving to work, waking up, anything that morning. Being there, standing in the patient's room, doing whatever I was doing with the patient was my first memory since like I went to bed the night before. You cannot have DID without things like that happening, and some of it is more severe than others, some of it is more longer term than others. But if you don't have times where you like lose memory, or there's like amnesic walls like up that you don't remember things, you could still be dissociated. You can absolutely still be dissociated, but that's more likely OSDD or like partial DID or something like that, OSDD1. And the same thing with the alters, like I said. If you don't black out for long periods, you don't have DID. So I kind of already covered this with like waking up at work and not remembering driving to work. I only lived like 15 minutes from work. So there's this theory out there by people who just want to go and like catch everybody who's faking. And I want to say this too. I called out the people who were talking about how you can have DID without trauma earlier, because that is a very, very obvious lie. You cannot have DID without trauma, and not a single psychiatrist, therapist, anybody anywhere close to that field believes that. With that being said, if it is not a glaringly obvious smoking gun type case like that, it is not your job to investigate people, to criticize them, to try to figure out who is faking, who is not, all of this, because it can present in so many different ways. And if you don't know what you're doing and know what you're talking about, you're going to accuse somebody of faking who actually has the disorder, and you're going to do a lot more damage. So it's usually better safe than sorry to just kind of leave that alone. And if something happens where it's like undeniable that like this person is faking, then you can do whatever you do with that. But getting back into it here, if you don't black out for long periods, you don't really have DID. So there is this theory among some that you have to have, it's called time loss. You have to lose like entire months or years at a time where you don't remember anything, where somebody else was in control for a very extended period of time. And if you don't have that, then you absolutely do not have DID. That is not true. There's what's called microamnesia, which is stuff like you might be at the store, you might remember going to the store, you might remember checking out, and then when you get home, you might find something in your bag that you don't remember buying. But you look at and you're like, oh my God, did I steal this? Like, what happened? And then you look at the receipt and no, you had it, you put it in your cart, you rung it up, you checked it out, you paid for it, it's on the receipt. Or you might come to in a different room of your house and you might be like, I was just in the living room. What happened? How did I get here? Or you might be oh damn, it's 6 o'clock. What did I do the last 5 hours? I don't have any memory before 1 o'clock. Stuff like that. All of that is indicative of DID. You don't have to have like the extreme story that you hear sometimes, and it can happen. It doesn't mean the person is lying if they do have this, but you don't have to have like you woke up in a new city like 3 hours away or like 2 states away from where you live with no memory at all of how you got there. Or you thought it was 2023 and then you woke up and it was 2026 and you have absolutely no memory of the last 3 years. Very extreme stuff like that is not necessary to have DID. You do have to have some kind of amnesic loss, some kind of memory loss, time loss going on. Otherwise, it's more likely OSDD and things like that, which is still hard to deal with. It's not like, oh, well, you only have OSDD, therefore you don't matter, your story's not valid, fuck you. 6, we gotta kind of speed this up here. Hollywood style switches like the Split film. So, I'm not gonna spend very much time at all on that. Fuck Split, fuck people who like it. It did every single person with any remotely kind of disassociative things a very, very bad service, because it stigmatized an already very stigmatized group of people. DID used to be called multiple personality disorder. The name changed in 1994 to be more encompassing. It is not that you have like an evil twin inside of you that is fighting to get out, and if they manage to get out, they're gonna hurt a bunch of people because they want to just like kill a bunch of people for no reason. That is not a thing. And yeah. Number 7, if you really had DID, you would know, your friends would know, it would be obvious. Again, not going to spend very much time on this one. DID is, by its nature, a covert disorder. So what does that mean? It doesn't want to be found out. It doesn't want to be discovered. Not only by people outside, but even by the person who has it. It doesn't want to be known about. So, like we just talked about, those Hollywood-style switches where it's very obvious and like your eyes roll back and there's, like lightning from heaven and the ring of fire and all of this, and oh my God, this person is like turning into another person. That doesn't happen. That would be very counterproductive to the stated goal of staying covert, staying hidden. Which is also why a lot of times, a lot of vultures can blend or try their best to mimic the personality, the mannerisms, and all of that of the others, because it doesn't want to be found out. Number 8, OSDD and especially DID are frequently misdiagnosed at a very high rate. Again, no evidence of that at all. There is a stigma on it, and because of that, because of this idea that it's so severely misdiagnosed, there are a lot of psychiatrists that act like they're allergic to it and they don't want to diagnose it, and they want to do all of these other things before you even start like getting into that. And the results of that is that a very high percentage of people with DID, could be as high as 30%, are self-diagnosed, because the gatekeeping is so relentless that you have to go through. You have to meet all the right people. You have to meet people who not only believe you, but have the power to do something about it and are willing to help you and are willing to give you the diagnosis. And all of this together, it can take years to get an actual diagnosis for DID, to have something on paper from a psychiatrist, from a doctor. This is me. This is what I have. This is what I live with. And stuff like that. This belief that it's so frequently misdiagnosed does more harm than good. Number 9, you can develop DID or OSDD later in life or from a single childhood event. Again, we already kind of covered this. It has to develop in childhood. It has to develop before the personality is fused and solidified. What else? It has to be, the abuse and trauma has to be continuous and repeated and inescapable. So, trigger warning, very, very fast. I'll wait about 3 seconds. I'm going to talk about some childhood abuse real quick. Okay, if you haven't clicked off, if you're still here, I take it that you're okay continuing. I am a child sex abuse survivor. I was raped when I was 8. That's the one that I remember. I just started remembering that one last year, 27 years after the fact. So there's some of that memory loss. Probably 95% of my childhood, from childhood all the way up until like age 25, like 95% of that is just black nothing. Because someone else in my system, most likely Sam, is the one who was in front a lot of that time. And that can be hard to hear. It's hard for me to digest. It can be hard to hear as a parent that for very long periods of time, growing up, my child was not my child, or who I thought that my child was. I thought I was talking to my child and I was talking to some other person. That was still your child. They are all individuals. They are all independent and autonomous and all of that, and whatever you want to put on it. But they are all still ultimately parts of the whole. They are identities that failed to integrate in the initial personality integration. So, if my childhood rape at 8 years old, if that was the only thing that happened to me, as horrific as that is, if that was the only thing that happened to me and nothing else happened to me, I would not have developed DID. There are no known studies that you can develop DID from a single traumatic event, as traumatic as it might have been and as young as you might have been. It's just borderline for attention seekers. I'm not really going to spend much time on borderline personality disorder, BPD. You can feel free to look that up because I've already talked too long. But basically, it's do you feel like your personality is kind of all over the place, and it's very black and white, very literal thinking. So you can be at certain times, this person is your savior, or this person is the devil in your life who is going to kill you, and there is absolutely no in between. That's a very, very simplistic way of looking at it. It's about all the more that I have time to go into it. But there is a theory that, a very stupid theory, that DID doesn't actually exist, and it's just people with borderline who want more attention because their borderline personality disorder isn't giving them enough attention, so they resort to attention-seeking behavior, and you get into histrionic personality disorder and all of that, where they are just making up these alters, or their brain is lying to them about the alters, whichever one. Now, there are co-occurrences. As many as 30 to 70% of people with DID also have borderline because the trauma that causes them is the same. And then you get into CPTSD, PTSD, stuff like that. Number 11, trans people are more likely to have DID or OSDD. This is another one of those that might be true, but the statement is misleading. Being trans is not a mental condition, a mental disorder. DID is. Trans people are severely more abused and severely more traumatized, especially if they show those signs from a young age, than the general population of people. So, in that sense, yes, it's entirely plausible that trans people are more likely to develop DID because of the abuse that we have to endure at the hands of people who are supposed to care for us and protect us because we were trans. But it is not at all a statement of, well, you're trans, so you were already born mentally ill, so of course you have DID too, which is kind of the way that it's presented. Number 12, you can cure it in final fusion. This is the last one. There is no known cure for DID. A treatment is not a cure. So the treatment is talk therapy, maybe some EMDR with a trusted professional under close supervision. You figure out system communication. You figure out how to talk to everybody, stuff like that. And basically to get everybody on the same page and be like, look, you know, we're all in the same body. We're all in the same head. Whatever happens to one of us really happens to all of us, if you think about it. So it's in our best interest to talk and communicate and help each other out. That's the treatment, and that's called integration. So the alters remain as individual states, but everybody kind of works together. And so you might have one who goes to work. They're the one that goes to work because they're the best at whatever the work is. You might have one that handles the bills. You might have one that handles the shopping. You might have one that is in a relationship with the spouse, and it gets very, very, very complicated sometimes. But everybody has a job, everybody has a role, and everybody is working together to accomplish the ultimate same goal of survival and hopefully thriving. Final fusion is something that sounds nice and pretty, but it's not usually the goal. Not every system wants to do it. Not everybody in a system wants to do it. I can tell you for an absolute fact, Sam has no interest in final fusion. Right now, she doesn't really have interest in integration. She does not want treatment. She hates that I'm here. She does not want to talk to therapists or do any of these things. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of fear-based, traumatic reasons for that. So final fusion is basically if what should have happened in childhood actually finally happens. The personality fully integrates, the alters are gone, the so-called multiple personalities are gone, and you're just you. And you don't have like all of these other people anymore. Some alters are going to resist that. Some systems entirely are going to resist that. And even if you achieve that, and this is very, very important, it does not mean that you are cured. DID is a lifetime condition. From the time that you have it, you're not going to be cured of it. You can ease the symptoms. You can lessen the pain. You can figure out how to kind of work within everything. But if you get to that point of final fusion, what most likely happens in the future sometimes, I shouldn't have said most likely, but what can happen in the future sometimes is more splitting. Because what happens is, after your brain, even though you do have to develop it in childhood, that's still true. But after your brain learns in childhood that, hey, I can cope with things by just like fragmenting and not letting things fuse together and just putting trauma over here and stress over here in different places and walling it off, then your brain is just going to keep doing that. So even in adulthood, you can form new alters, you can form new amnesic barriers. So even if you reach final fusion and then another stressor happens, then you're back, kind of like you were before. So final fusion, even if you achieve it and you get system agreement from everybody in the system that yes, this is the thing we all want to do, when you get there, that does not mean that your DID is just gone and you will never have to deal with it again. Yeah. Thank you everybody for watching. I didn't mean to talk for 31 minutes. Yeah. I love you guys. Thank you to everybody who loves me and stands by me and supports all of us.